I have a PowerPoint. First of all, I would like to thank the Academy for inviting me to this conference. It is a great privilege and honor. And in the past few days, I really learned a lot. It's a mind-opening exercise for me. So many diverse perspectives. Okay, now I would like to talk about the issue of participation and cultural integration from a communication perspective. Communication, in fact, is almost a cliche, in our field, that to communicate is to be human. And communication has been at the heart of human activities. We communicate every day with our friends, peers, family members, co-workers. Through communication, society is made possible. Without communication, there will be no communities. It is communication that distinguishes humans from other species. With language, humans free themselves from the limitation of acting in response to sense experience in the narrow present as other animals. With linguistic tools, humans can record their success and failure in dealing with environment, accumulating experiences for changes and improvement of their situation. The advancement of communication technology in the 20th century has tied together humankind more closely than ever before. After the collapse of Soviet communism in 1991, the spread of Western liberal democratic values was conceived by many to be final. For example, Fukuyama argued that the dominance of Western liberal democracy signified the end point of humanity's socio-cultural evolution and the final form of government. However, today, we can see that humans are still confronted with the challenge of socio-cultural integration. On the local front, people are divided into elites and masses, rich and poor, rulers and ruled. On the global front, various nations are still contending the Euro-American hegemony. And the present paper will focus only on the local front. This diagram tells us that even the Martian will consider that as a bit intense of our globalization. Robertson defined globalization as a process of compressing the world and deepening of a global consciousness. International capital flow sped up process of integrating national markets into global ones. The international capital inflows experienced a remarkable rise from the mid-1990s to the first half of 2000s, both in emerging developing economies and advanced economies. The global financial crisis in 2008 affected all major economies in the world, and with this financial globalization and volatility in the interlinked world markets, people far away came to be aware that they could be affected by a financial crisis broken out somewhere else, although they're not responsible for it. By revolutionizing the means of communication, large corporations have acquired massive freedom to reintegrate markets for labor power, goods, and services, and thus to maximize profits on a global scale. Neoliberal economics has brought the worship of free markets and free trade to an unprecedented new height. It emphasizes that rational self-interested individuals will maximize their utility through voluntary exchanges in market. The society will be better off with elimination of price controls, deregulation of capital markets, lowering of trade barriers, and reducing state influence on the economy, especially through, I can't see the word, especially through through austerity and price cut. The result of globalization and free trade, however, does not fulfill the promises given by neoliberal economists. In 2016, the United Nations Conference for Trade and Development remarked in its report just last year, apart from some Asian countries, globalization and free trade in the past decades did not benefit the developing world much. On the contrary, the neoliberal economic path led to premature deindustrialization, hurting the growth of the economy. Although the developed countries stand to gain in a globalized world with neoliberal economic practices, only big corporations and the rich reap the benefits. The income gap between the rich and poor has been widened over the years. Well, the other day, Professor Stiglitz already cited a lot of data. In fact, later I also cite his data. But let me take Hong Kong as an example. Because Hong Kong is one of the freest economies in the world, even Milton Friedman always used Hong Kong as his example to illustrate the benefits of free market economy. In 2015 and 16, Hong Kong was ranked 7th in the Global Competitive Index of the World Economic Forum, and World Bank ranked it the 5th in the Ease of Doing Business Index in 2015. So Hong Kong has one of the freest economies in the world. But Hong Kong's Gini coefficient was 0.46 in 1981, but it rose to 0.54 in 2011. So in the past 3 decades, globalization and the so-called small government did not help narrow Hong Kong's income gap. Hong Kong peoples at 20th percentile rank also got a monthly income of Hong Kong dollar 7,600 in 2001 at constant price, but it was decreased to 7,500 after a decade in 2011. People at the 50th percentile also register a decrease. Only rich people get richer. People at the 90th percentile rank got 33,700 monthly in 2001, and it got a lot more in 2011. Okay, the trickle-down process did not materialize, at least in the case of Hong Kong. And Stiglitz, the other day, he also used this data. Observed in the US, the bottom 90% has endured income stagnation for a third of a century. The median income for full-time male workers is actually lower in real inflation, adjusted terms, than it was 42 years ago. At the bottom, real wages are comparable to their level 60 years ago. That was Stiglitz statistic. He also cited that the other day, the first day. While the politicians do not deliver their promises of benefits for all, they provide few measures to protect those who are displaced by workers in their countries due to free market and free trade. In 2016, nearly 15%, that's another data, nearly 15% of American population was on food stamps. Now, in absolute terms, it's a lot of people. A strong distrust and lack of confidence in the establishment grew, and collective actions against globalization and mainstream politicians finally emerged. After the victory of the British voter in Brexit and the win of Donald Trump last year, the anti-globalization force grabbed the spotlight. The discontent among the masses about neoliberal economics, particularly free trade, immigrants, minimal government intervention, is the root of recent upheavals in European and American politics. We have elites and masses. The classical elite theory stipulates that all societies are ruled by organized minority who imposes its will over the disorganized majority. And one distinguishing characteristic of the ruling elite is their capacity to organize, vis-a-vis the disorganization of the masses. And well-organization calls for good communication. Without communication, you can't organize. Ruling elites controlled not only the economic and political resources, but they also control the communication machinery. So that's another term used by, I would say, the ideological state apparatus, quite often is also controlled by the state's elites. The mainstream media, including newspapers, radio, television, magazines, are used by the elites to form a dominant discourse and construct a social reality to maintain their governance. The common mass rarely has direct access or control of the media, not to say transmitting alternative or anti-establishment messages through the media. So without communication, no organization is possible. Okay, and in the recent decades, we observe a failure of the legacy media and also the ascendancy of new media. The mainstream legacy media has failed to represent the masses' views and discontent. Mass media do not represent the mass. As there is little exchange of information, views, and ideas between the elites and masses on equal terms, the masses simply cannot participate effectively in important decision-making made by the elites. The legacy mass media failed to play a role in integrating the masses with the elites, as the general mass, particularly the counter-publics, were denied access to the dominant public sphere. Habermas noted the mass media public sphere had changed the culture-debating public into culture-consuming public. Now, basically, mass media ideally should serve as a forum for people to discuss all sorts of issues rationally. However, he found that in 1989, that now, in fact, the public sphere offered by mass media has become culture-consuming. And the essence of critical, rational political discussions in the public sphere was lost. One common response of the elites to Brexit and Trump win was utter bewilderment. A widely shared explanation was masses had been driven by irrational fears and overblown anxieties, reacting with impulses. A more extreme view was, it's time for the elites to rise up against the ignorant mass and to undilute the diluted masses. Most of the polls failed to predict Trump would win the election. In retrospect, they failed to reach the mobile phone users and those wary of surveys. A new company, Brand's Eye, which got its prediction right, had used a different method which analyzed social media posts. Its different approach pointed to a Trump victory as well as Britain's Brexit vote. The success in predicting political outcomes through analysis of social media and big data points to the emergence of new media as a platform for articulation and aggregation of public opinion. New media provides now an alternative public sphere for the masses to express and exchange their views, ideas, resentment, and anger. All right, these are some of the social media, including Skype, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr, Facebook. Trump was not popular with the America's newspapers. Out of the top 100 circulation print newspaper, only 2 endorsed him. And more than 200 newspapers supported Clinton, while Trump received support of fewer than 20. However, Trump received more support according to the data, all right? I searched from the website. Trump, however, received more support in the new media websites and social media. In the midst of the campaign, Trump was found well ahead of Clinton in the positive comments, for example, the likes, all right? That ran counter to the polls. And using the internet and social media, the masses now have alternative channels to express their views and empower themselves into collective actions. W. Lance Bennett gave an explanation for the emergence of new media as a new platform for a new form of collective actions and social movements. He noted that the dominance of the neoliberal economics in recent decades has privatized public sectors, and the market deregulation philosophy has contributed to a decline of group loyalties and social fragmentation. And it also leads to growth of personal stress and sense of responsibility for choices and consequences. So instead of asking how things will affect the collective well-being, today people start to raise the question, how things will affect me. And accompanied with the personalized politics is a strong mistrust of politicians and mass media which are indifferent and irrelevant to their interests, particularly the young people and the marginalized. Consequently, alternative personalized media, particularly mobile phones, internet websites, and social media, constitutes a new platform for alternative views and collective actions. While the counter-public's views before Trump's ascendancy were not represented in the mainstream media and conventional polls, the suffering and angry masses found their expressions in the new media. New media could serve as an alternative public sphere for masses because it has an individuated network structure. But this is a very special feature of our new media. It's individuated, but at the same time it's networked. It provides a platform where individuals can express their private dissenting views, yet with potential of reaching huge and diverse audiences through numerous private and public networks. Previously, dissenting or anti-establishment views needed to reach the wide public through mass media in order to have influence or apply pressure to the state or government or the market for changes. But with the emergence of social media, dissidents and marginalized groups do not need mass media anymore to publicize their views. Through social networking sites, they can reach big audiences, not only within their own country, but also other parts of the world. So a new media now becomes an alternative public sphere. Communication is crucial in integrating people into a community, but it's not sufficient to solve problems of resource allocation, distribution of social values, and conflicts arising from social justice, from social injustice. The cleavages between elites and masses will not be closed simply by more communication, let alone one-way communication. The masses in both developed and developing countries have for many decades suffered from the neoliberal order, which benefits mainly the well-off elites and big companies. Opposition to the neoliberal order is often counted as irrational, selfish, or short-sighted in the mainstream media. Legacy media are filled with voices from big business, government officials, pro-establishment academics, and social notables. Masses' discontents and opposing voices are suppressed in the mainstream media, discouraging two-way dialogues between the elites and the masses. With the new platform of communication, the masses can articulate and aggregate their own interests now and express their discontent through collective actions, which include protests, voting, and social movements. The alternative and rebellious nature of new media has been testified and documented by many social movements in recent decades. For example, in May 2009, social media was used to mobilize an online movement that moved offline in Guatemala in protest against the president. The president was accused of murdering a lawyer by a video produced by the lawyer before he was assassinated. And just within a few days, Facebook could organize the masses come to the street to protest. In the uprising in Egypt in early 2011, social media, particularly Facebook and Twitter, also play a central role in mobilizing people to protest in the Tahrir Square and leading to the downfall of President Mubarak. In the Occupy movements in the US, social media had contributed to assembling masses of individuals from diverse backgrounds within physical spaces to confront the establishment. August 2010 in Chile, protests also broke out against the Barrancones power plant, which would have closed a reserve housing 80% of the world's humboldt penguins. Facebook use was found to be associated significantly with protest activities in Chile, as well as in the umbrella movement in Hong Kong in 2014. So the dissidents and counter-publics in Brexit and Trump victory demonstrated once again the power of the internet and the social media in subverting mainstream narratives in the legacy media. Conclusion. The recent upheavals in European and American politics have awakened the elites to the alternative platform provided by the new media in constructing an alternative social reality, contesting the elite's mainstream narrative. More important, the counter-hegemonic discourse can move people into action and displace the power and position of the elites. At present, two communication platforms, one provided by the legacy mass media and the other by the internet and social media, with two contrasting discourses and two versions of social reality existing side by side. Whether these two platforms and two discourses can have dialogues is crucial to the successful integration between the elites and the masses. A prerequisite for genuine dialogues between the elites and masses is both sides are willing to listen to each other. And it is even more crucial that the elites are willing to give up some of their gains from the neoliberal order to meet the needs and aspirations of the masses. If the masses can have more participation in economic, social, and cultural affairs through genuine dialogues in the new public sphere, there is a good chance of arriving at a just socio-cultural integration. If the elites continue to aggrandize their gains at the expense of the masses, society will splinter into opposing camps, making social integration harder than ever. Because new media possesses a unique feature of filtering out undesirable or unwanted messages. If the user chooses to block out messages he or she does not like, the message or communicator of the message will be filtered out. This, again, is due to the individuated nature of the communication network formed in the cyberspace. Since social media users are engaged in private communication and have control over contents to which they are exposed, they are likely to confine their contacts to like-minded people and to avoid those whom they don't like. And that this is we call echo chamber effect. And this effect will reinforce existing and inclining views embraced by the counter-publics. So without exposure to opposing or alternative views, the discourses and actions may become overly critical and extreme. If the masses decide to stay in the echo chamber, it will lead to social disintegration rather than integration. It is likely that with increasing influence of the new media in politics and economy, the elites will try to control and manipulate like what they did to the mass media before. They will try to dominate the alternative public spheres, which threaten their power and interests. So in fact, the elites will not just stand aside. Obviously, the markets and also the state, the big business, will try to control this new public sphere. And then when the older generation are gone, more people will use new media, which will displace the mass media. Some prominent websites and social media platforms controlled by the state or businesses will certainly appear. However, it is doubtful whether this state or market-controlled new media sites will become the dominant public sphere like before in mass media and nullify the counter-public's role of new media. It is again because of the individuated and low-cost nature of setting up social networking sites. It will allow people to set up alternative and also insurgent sites easily. And more important, new media users can block unwelcome information or discourses, receiving only contents they want. So this makes the domination of elite discourses in the new public sphere difficult and ineffective. So in fact, we are witnessing a new culture developing, particularly among the young people. If the elites and masses are unwilling to negotiate for a shared fair distribution of social values, incessant fights between the haves and have-nots will last. It will not stop. And that this scenario between the elites and masses, in fact, could also be applied to the global world, where the Euro-American powers dominate the global distribution of wealth and cultural values. And while many nations are still struggling for decent living and dignity, the socio-cultural integration of humans on the global front will be discussed in another paper. Thank you. That's my presentation.